Episode 6, a discussion of Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 5. We usually try to get these out the Monday after Game of Thrones was aired. This one is getting out a little bit later because when I was about to release the normal conversation Kate and I have, I got a few questions on Facebook and even texted to me asking about who the Three-Eyed Raven was and what does he want. So I wrote a little piece about who the Three-Eyed Raven is based on what I know from the books. If you want to skip to that part, go up to the 34 minutes and 40 seconds mark. And listen to that, and then you can come back and listen to the whole episode, or just listen to it in the normal order. But either way, I do my best to explain what I know about the Three-Eyed Raven. Okay, I'm here again with my wife, Kate. Hello, Kate.
Hi.
So we were originally thinking about doing this every other episode, so we've done 2 of them, recapping the first 2 episodes and the second 2 episodes. But there's so much happening, and I've been not very good about getting out other content, non-Game of Thrones content, that we should just move it to weekly so we can get a little more out there and a little shorter episodes maybe. We have, for the first time, a little bit of discussion on our Facebook from our last episode from our 6 listeners.
So, in all fairness, we have more than 3.
Yeah, it was brought to my attention that you made a comment about Missandei's wardrobe change that I did not respond to. So let's talk about wardrobe a little bit. Just some Game of Thrones trivia stuff that I remember seeing on the internet. First one is the night that Ramsay raped Sansa and made Theon watch. Theon was wearing a black outfit to their wedding. And that was the same outfit that Robb Stark wore at the Red Wedding when he was killed. So Ramsay made Theon wear Robb's outfit that he died in. So that's some fashion talk I can contribute.
Okay.
Also in Season 3, if you look at Daenerys' blue dress, it has scales on it. And throughout the season, the scales get more and more intense, which is something I saw on the internet, which is kind of interesting. And then, if you look at Stannis, his armor is different than anyone else's armor. He has very thin armor that's chainmail and armor melded together rather than armor on top of chainmail. So I was looking into that a little bit. And it turns out that's the kind of armor that they wore sometimes in like the Mideast, like the Persians. Mm-hmm. But then also it's probably more heavily influenced from Filipino armor called Moro armor. So I do pay attention to wardrobes in Game of Thrones.
Just not when I talk?
I just didn't have much to say about Missandei's wardrobe change.
Yeah, she was just wearing like the biggest bell bottoms I've seen.
Yeah, it did look 70s-ish last episode. I think they just wanted to show her stomach. I will say I do like Jon Snow's ponytail look.
I do too. Yeah.
That looks
great
good.
Man bun. Maybe I'll have our son do a similar thing.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I already do.
Okay, so now that the fashion's out of the way, I hope that satisfied at least one listener who noticed my mistake last time. A lot happened this episode.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start?
Let's start at the wall. Let's save what happened at the very end of the episode for the end of our episode here.
Okay. The big stuff at the end. So you 6 listeners, you got to be dedicated to get all the way through this.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
It's important stuff at the end.
But okay, the wall. So Sansa with Littlefinger here, and she's basically saying what we're all wondering: you're either an idiot or you can't be trusted. Whether or not he knew who Ramsay was and what he sent her into, and when she trusted him so much. And I think that Sansa is finally learning what Ned could never learn, and that's you should never trust Littlefinger. So that might be an interesting thing as part of her arc, maybe, of getting smarter and being able to do something that ultimately was her own father's demise.
Maybe Littlefinger had more nefarious plans for her. Maybe he thought she would die at the hands of Ramsay, and somehow that would have furthered his game. But either way, yeah, at least she said what all the Watchers were saying, because it didn't make any sense. Littlefinger tells Sansa that Brynden the Blackfish has reformed the Tully army at River Run, which is pretty interesting. And then she spreads this news to Jon and Davos and everybody in the planning room, but she does not say how she heard about it. Why do you suppose she kept it secret?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like she has some element of a lack of trust for Jon, maybe, with that. Littlefinger also, they made a point to have him say half-brother in the episode right before they parted. And maybe that's to show that he probably still has some influence on Sansa, or what he was trying to teach her all along is still having some influence on her. She's keeping more of her cards to her chest, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So either Littlefinger still has some sway on her, or maybe he's manipulating her, or maybe not. Maybe she's just playing it smart and doesn't want everyone to know, or
Yeah.
who knows. But for whatever reason, she was not fully honest with Jon, which is kind of interesting.
But now we know that the Knights of the Vale are at Moat Cailin, and so I feel like they're probably going to help in the upcoming Bastard Bowl. And we also know that Brynden the Blackfish has rallied Riverrun's army, and maybe they will also help in the upcoming Bastard Bowl. So these are two armies here that we didn't know about before that are starting to come into play.
How Littlefinger chooses to use his troops, I'm not sure, but it seems pretty likely that Brynden Tully would side with Sansa. In the books, Brynden Tully has his army at River Run, and Jaime Lannister lays siege to River Run, and Brynden escapes in the middle of the night. So Brienne is going to meet Brynden at River Run. Do you think that Jaime might end up there somehow too, like in the books?
Yeah, I'm really interested about Brienne leaving Sansa. Like, clearly she's conflicted about it, but this might be a setup how the show is going to combine a little bit more where the books are. I mean, definitely that she and Jaime Lannister are supposed to be in the same place, and that's an interesting plot line that seemed really far off from happening, that now maybe this is how it might come together.
Jaime will have to take care of everything in King's Landing first, or it's hard for me to see a reason why he would go to River Run unless they quickly tie up that storyline in King's Landing. Anything else at the wall?
No, I think that's everything.
So I'll just quickly, I was looking at a Song of Ice and Fire wiki page for the books Battle of Winterfell. So this is the upcoming, but hasn't happened yet, Stannis versus the Bolton fights. And tell me if this sounds familiar from the scene we saw tonight. According to this wiki page, on Stannis' side, there is House Baratheon, House Florent, House Bar Emmon, House Valerian, the Northern Mountain clans, House Wool, House Flint, House Neri, House Little, House Mormont, so Jorah's family is with Stannis, House Glover, half of House Umber, which we've seen, met them in the shows, and Hornwood, Kerwin, Tallheart, at least some of them. And then on Roose Bolton's side is House Bolton, House Frey, House Karstark, House Ryswell, House Dustin, the other half of House Umber, some of House Hornwood, some of House Carwyn, House Manderley, which is not really with the Boltons, they're just pretending to be. We heard about them tonight on the show. And House Locke. So this just completely reinforces the argument I've been making that they're giving all of Stannis' storyline to Jon and Sansa for the show. But it felt, when they were talking about all these names tonight, it made me think of this, how it's going to happen in the books. Mm. All right, anyways, where do you want to go next?
Let's go to Pike.
King's Moot. Pretty fast.
Yeah, but I'm okay with that. I think if they drew it out any longer, it might have gotten a bit boring, but it was interesting seeing Theon support Yara, or Asha, as she's called in the books. And then, just FYI, the old guy running the Kingsmoot is Aeron Greyjoy, who's the brother of Balon and Euron, who chose to become a priest. So he's actually part of all that, but he's true to being a priest and less so to his family. But then, here we got Yara trying to claim the Iron Throne, and then Euron showing up. And I liked watching Theon support her. I feel like we're going to see more of them kind of as a pair, and I like that. I like that pairing. Every now and then Game of Thrones show does a pairing that I really enjoy. And
I got to give you credit where credit's due. Last week you predicted that Euron would try to take his army to go help Dany or to recruit Dany or whatever. So you got two things right. You said that would happen, and then you also predicted that somehow Bran will have influence on Hodor in the past, which we'll talk about later, but that was two good predictions on your part.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to finish up, and this is my last piece, at least on with Pike, is I didn't realize how divided the Iron Islands were. I had a feeling that Yara and Theon were going to run off, but I mean, they took all those ships. Do you know how many people they would need to man those ships? So
yeah, it seems kind of silly to me that Euron can just say, cut down all the trees and build me 1,000 ships. Like, I guess the economy on Pike works a little different. And I've kind of been under the impression that Pike is relatively barren and doesn't have all that many trees to
right.
When their whole fleet's just been taken.
Along? Did they just need a leader to come by and be like, make a bunch of ships?
Right.
So
where do you think she's going?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, wouldn't it be cool if she and Theon went to Winterfell to help them out, and what an arc for Theon's there, where he was the downfall of Winterfell and might be actually part of its returning back to the Starks. So I don't know. I just thought that might be a cool thing to see for at least Theon's storyline. But I mean, they got to go somewhere, and I don't know where they can go.
Yeah.
So, but they got a bunch of ships, and those ships are probably going to come in handy, and you know what, the Stark army could really use some ships. So I guess we'll just have to see. But that's kind of what I would like to see, where I'd like to see them go.
Yeah. I liked when they drowned him and he came back. That gives a little more meaning to what is dead may never die. You know, if the drowning is supposed to mimic death, and then he comes back. And
I think it also shows like that the drowned god favors you, and it also just shows how the Ironborn believe in strength in that way. That if you're meant to be alive, you'll come back, and you're going to be a true Ironborn. And if you die, then maybe you weren't.
Yeah, it would have been pretty funny if he just died, and
that was it.
From the show point of view. Like,
yeah.
And Yara was already gone.
Like the whole story of that one guy from Dorne in the books, where we follow his storyline and then he just dies.
Yeah, Quentin Martell.
Yeah.
We get 1,000 pages of him, and then he just gets toasted by a dragon out of nowhere.
Yeah, and you're like, why?
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Okay, so anything else with Pike?
No, that was pretty much it.
I felt like Theon, he's not that broken. It seems this whole season he's not that broken. I mean, he's rallying support for his sister. He's giving speeches. He still looked a little tweaked out, but I don't know. He's coming back to good old Alfie Allen pretty quick.
Yeah. You know, it's not uncommon for trauma survivors, once they're out of harm's way, to start have a semblance of who they used to be again. So I guess I could see that for him.
Yeah, and the show also does a really terrible job of telling us how much time has passed, and it almost feels like in some parts of the show it's been a long time, in other parts it's been a very short time. So like at the Wall, it all seems to be 1 or 2 or 3 days that everything's happening. But for Theon to even get to Pike would take weeks, months, whatever. So I'm kind of okay with there being different time warps all around Westeros. That's how they got to tell a story for a show format, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, where to next?
Let's go to Bravos with Arya. It was interesting hearing a little bit of the background of the Faceless Men. Are they against slavery since they were started by slaves? And if so, is this some tie to maybe Dany's cause against slavery? I'm trying to understand a little bit of why we got a little bit of that backstory from the guy who looks like Jaqen H'ghar.
Did they talk about slavery?
Yeah, about the first Faceless Man and how it started off, and they started off in what was it, Volantis? But yeah, and then it was slaves, and then he was talking about, and then there were no more masters, and then Arya asked, well, where did they go next? He said, well, they came here to Bravos, the free city. And so I'm just kind of wondering again, like, I'm wondering if there's a whole point to them saying that. But then it's also interesting here too, because are they much more than just hired assassins? Because in the books, it does talk about how you can pay enough money to the Faceless Men, but they're very, very expensive if you wanted to assassinate someone. And then it was talking about here with Arya, she was kind of asking those questions about who she's supposed to kill. And Jaqen H'ghar, the guy who looks like him, said the price has been paid. And so it just kind of makes you wonder a little bit of what's behind all this of the Faceless Men, and are they nothing more than hired assassins, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, they seem, as far as this actress chick goes, who knows anything about her, but they seem to be, from Arya's point of view, ready to just off someone who might not be a terrible person or might not have done anything wrong. And
to maybe make a point to test Arya, it was interesting because the character who I think is the waif, who is training with Arya, she's like, you're still a Stark, and then the guy, Jaqen H'ghar, comes and says, oh, there is a point to that. And so, I mean, he seems really hesitant to let Arya use the faces, and it's like he already knows she's always going to be a Stark at heart, so what's his end game with training her?
I wonder if she's going to be commanded to kill someone that she loves for the Faceless Men.
Yeah, and I was like, he was testing her by making her go watch that play, which was about her dad, and seeing how much of Arya comes out, if she's really supposed to be no one. And maybe that's the whole test, is do what you're told, and it doesn't matter what it's about or who it is. Or
Yeah, I'm not really into the Arya storyline. It's cool seeing Bravos, and it's cool seeing Jaqen H'ghar, but I don't know. Every time she comes on, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
I don't mind it.
All right, what else?
Well, let's go to Vace Dothrak. It's interesting to see Jorah, who's willing to kind of give up now, to leave Dany and go die live a little bit, and then before it gets too bad, off himself before he becomes a stone man.
Yeah, I really liked Ian Glenn's acting in that scene.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing.
I felt like he did a good job acting by admitting that he loved her, which we all knew, but it was hard for him to say, and his facial expressions and where he looked and stuff, I just thought he did a really good job at that.
Yeah, he plays Jorah so well, and he does so much acting without talking. You just read it on his face. Another great moment for Ian Glenn was when he finds out that his dad died by Tyrion. Mm. And they don't even say anything. You just see in his face this whole wave of emotion. And in this, I just, I very much was struck by his acting again, playing Jorah, and you just really believe it. And you don't always have to talk, and it's just there in your body language and facial expressions. And I like, too, that Jorah finally admitted his love for her. It's probably the most honest he's ever been with Dany. It's like he's coming full circle from who he's been to just be honest and say, hey, here I am. And I like how Dany is actually... we're finally seeing her true feelings for Jorah, which is about time. I mean, she's being more honest to herself with this, that she actually does care about him, even though he betrayed her. And she kept sending him away and stuff. And so it's just nice to see them both. It was a very honest moment, and I like that. And I liked how she gave him hope and a cause so that he can come back to her and then find this supposed...
he's going to find a cure?
Well, I mean, this part is interesting to me because clearly one supposedly exists because Shireen had grayscale and they stopped it and she was quote unquote cured. So I guess it exists, but we don't know much about this cure, and wouldn't it be kind of well known or more widespread? I feel like that's a little bit of a hole that's in the books too that's not really fully explained of how is it that we don't know about this cure for such a contagious disease.
Yeah, in the books they keep implying that, or at least I feel like they're implying that something, or foreshadowing that something bad with grayscale is going to happen. So I originally thought that if Shireen were to be burned, it would somehow spread grayscale and lead to some epidemic. That didn't happen. And then in the books, it's not Jorah who gets grayscale. He doesn't even have it. It's is it John Cunnington or...
It's the one with young Griff.
Yeah, I think it's John Cunnington. It's one of those guys in a storyline that was completely taken out of the show. And he's the one who catches grayscale like Jorah did in the show. And I keep thinking that he's going to create an epidemic somewhere. But it seems unlikely to me that they'll have Jorah cause an epidemic. It's just, he seems like a decent guy. And I don't know, it just seems weird for me if the show did that to him. It seems that they put him on the path for a cure for tonight's episode. And to have him infect a whole bunch of people, which may not even happen, but there's a number of reasons in the book that makes me think that there's going to be some big problem with grayscale.
And then that whole scene ends then with they're all leaving Face Dothrak, and Dany is once again on a white horse. So I just can't help but wonder if there's some symbolism to that, but we'll see.
So speaking of Jorah, she goes, Jorah the Andal, which is his name, but Jorah is not an Andal. So the Andals are a group of humans that migrated to Westeros. And they were like the second wave of humans to go there. And the first men were the first wave. They all came from Essos. So when the first men went to Westeros, the children of the forest were there. And this is going to be a nice segue to our next discussion about the children of the forest. But so Jorah is a first man. The Mormonts are up in the north, and the Starks are first men. I was trying to figure out why they call him Jorah the Andal, and it's because the Dothraki translate Westerosi people into Andals regardless of the details.
Oh, okay.
So it's just the Dothraki that call him that. But Jorah is not an Andal. He's mostly first man. So then the first wave of humans to go to Westeros, they encountered the children of the forest, and they fought for a long time, like peoples often do when they clash, especially considering that the children of the forest aren't even humans, so they're like the elves of Game of Thrones. So that is when, apparently, as we found out tonight, they created the White Walkers, was in this war with the first men, because the first men were cutting down their trees and doing all sorts of stuff.
And killing them, yeah.
And killing them, right. So it was a big battle. So it was exposed to us tonight that the children created the White Walkers, which I kind of suspected, or at least am not shocked at all by, but I wasn't extremely happy with the way that they told us that, because we know so little about the children of the forest. It was almost like they told us too much, too fast. I was kind of looking forward to discovering that in the book, but I knew we'd probably find out in the show. But it's like, we know so little about the children that to find out they created the White Walkers, like the children of the forest, or the girl, whatever she's called, the elf or nymph or whatever, was like, she was like, yeah, we were under attack, our trees were being cut down, and they basically created these weapons of mass destruction. But I feel like for a show watcher only, they wouldn't even know what she was talking about. Do you feel the same way?
I don't know. I mean, it is such a big revelation, but I think sometimes that's just how you got to show it. It's just there. And it makes sense in the context of the...
But do you think show watchers understand what the Child of the Forest was saying with them being...
I think so, yeah.
Because I don't think it's ever talked about the children being hunted by humans or anything.
But she says it pretty quick, because when Bran is like, from whom? And she's like, from you.
Yeah. Which
just gives a different context, you know. I think that it would translate to just show watchers. I mean, I do find it really interesting that the White Walkers were created by these children of the forest. It's an interesting twist. The ancient symbols that we've seen that have come up so far whenever we see like the hordes of the whites is actually the symbols of the children of the forest. And that's where these White Walkers get their symbols from. So I guess there's some continuity there.
The symbols being the bodies laid out.
Yeah, the way the bodies are laid out. Remember that one formation of all the carcasses of the horses and the men when the Night's Watch comes upon them. We get that aerial view in the memory, which has got the same symbol. 2. Yeah, but the same symbols are being used here. And they're actually the symbols of the children of the forest. And that's why the whites use them, because they were created by them.
So the guy who she shoved the knife into turns into a White Walker. Is that the Night's King? It looked like the same actor to me.
Yeah, I think that's the Night's King.
Big nose and eyes kind of close together. So that was the first one. So in book canon, at least, we know that the children and the first men teamed up and defeated the White Walkers.
Yeah, and they created the wall.
And created the wall thousands of years ago. So now, apparently this guy, this Night's King, this original one, has been in hiding for all this time and is now building up his army again or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think of that, and I'll make a comment on that a little bit later, but it's interesting to me how these children of the forest create this to save them from their ultimate extinction, and yet are they actually extinct now after this episode by these things that they created to prevent their extinction? There's so much irony with that. There's a little bit of this like 2001 A Space Odyssey, like with Hal, like the Ghost of the Machine kind of thing here of the creation turning against its creator.
No, it certainly seems to be almost like a Star Trek type message about nuclear war or something like that. The warnings of creating weapons of mass destruction.
I think in this world of A Song of Ice and Fire, there is some sort of balance. So if we have these... If this world can create something as awful as the White Walkers, then it can create something that can rival them, which I think we already know, which is the dragons. But I don't think that it's something where the White Walkers are just completely indestructible and they're just going to take over, or that like the men or humans are just going to get lucky. I feel like there's got to be some sort of balance to this, and I'm curious about maybe how the Lord of Light might play into that and who that really is. And
yeah, we see once again with the Lord of Light priestess that they actually do have magic and power, and they're not all phonies. She knew Vari's deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah, I guess we skipped Marine. Yeah, that sorceress who I guess was the first servant of the Lord of Light as she was introduced. Looks very similar. Melisandre's got that same necklace, but she knows that she comments in the Great War still to come, so she must be referencing like this war that we know about the White Walkers. And I'm very curious, what does the Lord of Light have to do with that? Did he create Dany's dragons the way she said? And she also said that she thinks Dany is the prince that was promised. So we were talking about that last podcast, and here's at least a show character saying, yep, that's Dany. So we'll kind of see what plays out with that. And she sure knew a heck of a lot about Varys and freaked the crap out of him.
Yeah, the Lord of Light seems pretty unpredictable to me at this point, but again, I said this last episode and I was saying it again, it seems very obvious to me that it's something real. Maybe not the actual god, but there's obviously power there. And now we've got 2 contestants for the prince that was promised, or the whatever was promised between Jon and Dany.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how book readers kind of expected it, but who knows? Maybe there's a third option that we're not even aware of. Or maybe it's both.
Maybe it's Tyrion.
Yeah, maybe. I hope not.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this whole end sequence with like the 3-eyed raven, who's gone now. I mean, that guy was around for a long time. A part of me feels like he should have seen Bran's mistake coming, given how old he is.
He's tired. He's old. He's taking a nap.
Yeah, maybe he wanted to die, which is interesting, though, because Bran wasn't ready, and he made the comment to say, hey, you're not ready, and how dangerous that all is. But then he brought Bran right to where Bran needed to be, so in the past, so that he could warg into Hodor. So it's almost as if the Three-Eyed Raven knew this was going to happen. Or at least he just knew that's what he had to do. Because all that has already happened. He's already said that the ink has dried in the past, so he knew what happened with Hodor with that. And yet brought him there. So I'm still trying to make sense of this. I mean, we make these podcasts so soon after this airs, but it's almost like the Three-Eyed Raven knew this was going to happen all along. Or even if he didn't, he should have been wiser to know to warn Bran. Like maybe he should have told Bran, don't do this because this could get really bad really fast. It just seems so stupid not to warn Bran to do that.
The thing with time travel, as I understand it, is that even if we could time travel, which apparently Bran can, and we can affect the past, which apparently Bran can.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. So right now, if somebody could go back in time and try to change the course of human history, they would fail because human history is what it is. And that's already, the time traveling is already baked into it.
Right.
So that appears to be the case with this Game of Thrones also. He time travels and accidentally creates Hodor, or Hodor is somehow created by the side effect of Bran warging into him in the present, and that somehow spills over into the past, one way or another, but it was always going to happen that way. To your point, did the Three-Eyed Raven know about it? I don't know. I'm still working it all out myself.
Yeah.
All these time travel paradoxes are always, you can sit around and argue about the Terminator and Star Trek 4 and all that stuff all day long.
I always think Back to the Future.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one. It's interesting, though, again, because I always like to pay attention to everything, all the dialogue that gets said. And so in this same scene where we go back in the past, it shows Ned's dad telling him that, hey, if you ever have to fight, win. And so I'm wondering if that might come into play later with Bran.
Well, I wonder if also that was almost to make us feel better about killing Arthur Dayne that way. Like he pretty much has to...
Or anything that he does.
Yeah,
later on.
Okay, so we see clearly that a elf or a child of the forest stabs the White Walker and nothing happens. And then Mira Reed throws a spear and it kills him.
Yeah.
And it seems to have hit his armor. And so the big question is, was the spear made of obsidian or dragon glass?
It would have to be. That's the only thing that kills them.
Well, no. So we've had 3 White Walker deaths. The first one was Sam, killing a White Walker with dragon glass.
Yeah.
The second one was John, killing a White Walker with Longclaw, which is Valyrian steel.
Right.
And the third one is...
Which might have dragon glass properties, though.
The third one, yeah, maybe. The third one is Mira killing a White Walker with maybe dragon glass, but they haven't talked about dragon glass ever up there. So maybe...
But the Children of the Forest had it. Those were their spears.
But why didn't it work for the Child of the Forest?
Well, that's the interesting thing, and they clearly showed that it didn't work for the Child of the Forest, but it did with Mira. And so you've just outlined, we've now seen Mira, John, and Sam. So what is it that why all these people can do it, and why the Children of the Forest who created them couldn't?
Well, it seems to me that the dragon glass one with Sam is pretty straightforward. The John and Mira ones are less so. So I wonder if it might have something to do with them as individuals as much as with the weapon.
Yeah, like part of me, what I'm wondering is maybe do the Starks have some kind of immunity or something? And is their blood maybe somehow in all of these individuals some sort of way or not? But
well, Mira's not a Stark.
But like I'm talking like over centuries of how the blood might be transferred across different families. And if you have a little bit of that bloodline, you might have some immunity, or I don't even know what to call it, ability to kill them. Or it's just interesting. They clearly showed that the Child of the Forest couldn't kill the White Walker with a spear, but then Mira could. So the distinction was made.
Yeah, and the White Walkers look a little less intimidating, how easily they get destroyed if you have the right weapon, or maybe if you're just the right person. I think there's only supposed to be like 12 or 13 of them, right? We've already seen 3 of them go down.
Yeah.
The Night's King's army is dwindling, of his enforcers at least.
Yeah, another aspect of this whole end scene with Bran is I really didn't like how Summer was killed. It just seemed pretty stupid to me, and yet another direwolf here is dead.
Well, I think he took one for the team. He went out to buy them some time to start moving down the hall or whatever.
That's a really smart wolf, then.
Yeah, well, they are. And
yeah.
It was the same thing that the elf did with her grenade.
Yeah.
Which she could have just thrown it. I don't know why she let them...
Because she wanted to swarm around them to swarm around her to get a bunch more.
Yeah, those grenades seem to have gotten a little power upgrade since last season.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the best they have against this thing that they created. But in terms of the direwolves now, we're only left with Ghost and Nymeria, which is Arya's wolf, which we have no idea where that is. And so part of me is wondering if there is maybe some symbolism behind what happens to the Starks and their corresponding direwolves ultimately at the end of this story. Like maybe who lives and who dies. And maybe not necessarily like live and die the way you might think, but like, for example, now Bran is the next three-eyed raven. And so maybe the death of Summer is actually the death of Bran as he knew himself, and now as he becomes this new version of himself as this new three-eyed raven. That's kind of showing us the symbolism of that death and his quote-unquote rebirth in this new role.
Sansa, I don't think is going to die, and hers was the first wolf to die. I think she's going to survive the whole Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just they've clearly killed 2 direwolves pretty fast here, and
right. Well, that's a big theory. People try to connect the direwolf's fate to the Stark fate, and it might be true. The most obvious one was Robb's.
And again, I mean it symbolically too.
Right.
So we'll just see. I guess to go on to Hodor here, the origin of Hodor, at least in the show. But apparently this came from George R.R. Martin, and he told the show producers this, and hold the door, Hodor, and oh my God, my heart just broke during that scene. Like when the episode ended, I just felt so sad.
That was really well done. Good writing by George. I don't think anyone anywhere predicted that meaning to be why he says Hodor, or anyone expected him to go out that way.
And the episode's called The Door.
Right. So like, I mean, there's all sorts of theories out there on the internet about everything in Game of Thrones, and I try not to look at them too much because I don't want too much to be spoiled, but as far as I know, this was not on anyone's radar.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good and really powerful and sad. And it was really well done.
And I'm still trying to figure out what happened. So I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking that he became Hodor by experiencing his own death that will take place in the future. And that's what just jumbled up his mind so much. And if you think about it, if that's the case, that's absolutely horrifying.
Right.
And especially the way he dies.
I don't think Bran did it to him in the vision. I think because Bran was in Hodor at the time and in the past, that somehow it spilled over to young Hodor. So
which means his death is spilling over.
Right, yeah. So his death is what made him the way he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was...
And he's so faithful to the end.
Well, that's the other thing I wonder, though. Was that Hodor in the end, or was Bran still in him?
But even before that, how he can clearly understand and do things. You give him directions and he does things, and he's fairly competent in that way. And he just says Hodor all the time. But he was so faithful to Bran to get him up there and do all those things. So even if it was Bran holding him there at the end, the way that Hodor just... everything that he did for the Stark clan and then for Bran there, it just he was just such a diligent guy for that family. And oh yeah, it was just so sad.
Yeah, it's nice to have a hero that you don't expect. Like we knew that he was kind of like another direwolf for Bran, or kind of like, you know, just a big guy helping him out. But then the hero has totally unexpected origins, and it goes to show that not everyone has to be like Jon or like
come from noble birth.
Right.
So I have a couple comments here just of how the episode ended and where we're left. I was surprised that there weren't whites everywhere. I mean, supposedly the White Walkers have this huge army of whites, and they were just in the cave or on the other side. I get that they were in like a tunnel system underneath, but they have so many people. Like, I was surprised that Mir and Bran could even escape. And then clearly the White Walkers were very invested in getting the Three-Eyed Raven and Bran. So I'm really curious to see what that interest is, of why they were so important to come after and kill. But again, why wouldn't you be so sure to try and kill them and have your whole army there so they can't escape? I'm really curious to see how Mir and Bran are going to survive now, especially without Hodor and that huge army that's going to be right on their tail. It just seems so unlikely unless some bit of magic comes in to help. And who knows, maybe Cold Hands actually comes in, and maybe he comes in the form of Benjen Stark, who's still missing. And so I don't know, I have some hope for some of those kind of theories that you were talking about that fans have that are out there, and maybe that will come together. There's just some questions that are out here now because of what we saw tonight. And the last piece is like the Children of the Forest. If they created these White Walkers and they have this knowledge about them, and supposedly the Three-Eyed Raven is this dangerous person in Bran that the White Walkers have to come after, why did they wait so long to try and give the knowledge to Bran or to anyone? Why did they wait for the White Walkers to become so dangerous? And maybe the show has yet to explain that, but it just seems like such a big hole to me.
Yeah, so a lot of open-ended questions that we'll see where it goes. I give this episode probably 8.5. I thought it was solid.
Yeah, no, it was a very good episode. It reminded me a lot of how I felt after the Red Wedding, where you just feel pretty heartbroken and it just ends. You're like, yep, that was awful. What just happened?
Well, cool. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Thanks for participating, and we'll have another one out next week, and hopefully we'll get our listeners up from 6 to 9 or something. Okay, so here's my Three-Eyed Raven bonus section. All right, so who is the Three-Eyed Raven, played by Max von Sydow, and what does he want? Unfortunately, our information is somewhat limited, so as a book reader I can only be modestly helpful, if at all. As it appears, the show is completely changing things. In the books, as in the show, Bran Stark starts having visions of a three-eyed raven in his dreams. He later meets Jojen Reed, who is having similar visions. Jojen tells Bran that they can find the three-eyed raven north of the wall, so they set out with Hodor and Mira Reed to find him. When they find him, it's not a raven at all, but an old guy living in a tree. By the time he's killed by the Night's King in the show, we've learned very little about him. Honestly, all I remember him saying about his origins is that he's waited 1,000 years for Bran and that he needs to teach him, quote-unquote, everything. In the books, we know a bit more about his origins, but they don't match up with the show. In the books, the three-eyed raven reveals himself to be Brynden Rivers, who is the bastard child of Aegon IV Targaryen, who was a Targaryen king back in the day, and considered one of the shittier ones. Brynden Rivers, a.k.a. Bloodraven, a.k.a. the Three-Eyed Raven or the Three-Eyed Crow, was born in the year 175 in Westeros dating. Book 5/Season 6 takes place in about 299, so that puts him around 124 years old, which is much different from the 1,000 years mentioned in the show. However, maybe he replaced someone else who replaced someone else, and on down the line, that gives them a combined age of over 1,000 years. I really don't know. Before this guy became infused with the Great Tree, he was, as I mentioned, a bastard of the Targaryen king, and was said to be a great warrior and a sinister sorcerer. His life was fairly eventful, and he served as Hand of the King for a while. Then, after some controversy that's not necessary to get into, he was forced to take the black and become a member of the Night's Watch. He eventually became the Lord Commander. He disappeared on a ranging mission north of the Wall in 252, about 47 years before where we are in the show right now. The Three-Eyed Raven is a Green Seer. Indeed, he's supposedly the last Green Seer. A Green Seer is someone who has the ability to have prophetic dreams filled with symbolic meaning, images, and metaphors of what's to come. They also have the ability to warg, which is when you can enter the mind of an animal, like Bran does with his direwolf, and even does with Hodor. People who can do this are called wargs or skin changers. It is said that 1 in 1,000 people are born a skin changer, and 1 in 1,000 skin changers are born a Green Seer. Green Seers can see through the weirwood trees, which are the trees with the faces carved into them that we see from time to time. Since trees have no sense of time, the Green Seer can see into the past or present when looking through the eyes of a tree. So, if I understand it correctly, Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven cannot just view the past like they do in the show, but can only view the past if a weirwood tree was present. The First Men started cutting down these trees thousands of years ago because they suspected, correctly, that the Children of the Forest, through the Green Seers, were spying on them. This is part of what caused the war between the Children of the Forest and the First Men, which, as we just learned, was what led to the creation of the White Walkers. So at this point in the books, including the sample chapter of A Winds of Winter, Bloodraven, aka the Three-Eyed Raven, and Bran are still in the cave. It's hinted at, but not confirmed, that currently they are warged into ravens and are observing things at Stannis' camp. Remember that in the books, the battle between Stannis and the Boltons has not taken place. Stannis is outside Winterfell and has both Theon and his sister as captives. Listen to my Defending the Manus podcast for more details about this. Anyway, it appears that Bloodraven and Bran are watching Stannis and Theon. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. We really don't know the Three-Eyed Raven's intentions with Bran or what it has to do with the White Walkers or anything else. The show and books have diverged quite a bit far at this point, so your guess is as good as mine. Thanks for listening.